In addition to chairing the conference yesterday and today, I'm also here as a participant from IBM. I am the global leader for what we call hospitality and travel-related services. So I run the division that sells to our clients in hospitality, cruise, gaming and casino, car rental companies, as well as the intermediary space. So GDSs, online travel agencies, travel management companies, tour operators. So some weeks I have kind of bipolar moments because I'm speaking with travel providers, like hotels, who are all driving direct distribution and trying to disintermediate and get their hands on the data and own the customer more directly. And then 2 days later, I'm speaking to somebody in the intermediary space that's trying to figure out their role in this ever-changing digital supply chain. So it makes for some very interesting weeks. But what I'm going to talk about today, relative to customer experience, is cognitive computing and how cognitive computing is going to be used going forward to really start transforming the customer experience and especially to drive personalization. So for the first 10 minutes or so, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a primer on what really is cognitive computing. Because I think you hear a lot about cognitive computing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and not everybody quite knows exactly what that means. So let's all get on a level playing field. And then the last half of the presentation, I'll drill into some specific use cases in travel and some of the work that we're doing currently, actually implementing cognitive computing with travel and hospitality companies, okay? So does this image look familiar? Movie a couple years ago. So this is an image from The Imitation Game. So if you recall, the story is about the famous Cambridge professor, Alan Turing, who in the late 1930s created what was the first digital computer. So this started the age of digital computers. However, they were still programmable computers. Up until now, computers had to be told what to do. So even though this was a very revolutionary moment, creating the first digital computer, it completely changed the way that we use computers. Today, though, as of about 4 years ago, we've now proclaimed the era of cognitive computing. The big difference is with cognitive computing, the machine can consume large amounts of data that systems have never been able to digest before, and make decisions on its own about what to do next. Okay? So we're now building cognitive systems. That's why a lot of times it's referred to as artificial intelligence, machine learning, because it means computers being able to talk to computers, computers being able to digest large chunks of data, and data that's never been readable by systems before. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about why data is important here. And you've heard a lot of discussion over the last 2 days about digital transformation and guest experience and why getting your arms around your customer data is so important. I'm going to just go through a couple of slides to talk to why that's even more important as you go down your roadmap and start considering cognitive systems and how cognitive systems can be used to even more aggressively personalize and change the way that you engage with your customer. So I think we all know the data is just exploding. But in the last few years, it's just getting insane. And a lot of this is because we're going beyond just the transactional data that we create in our own organizations. And now we're starting to pull in unstructured data that comes from third-party sources, things like weather, things like social media. And only 90% of that data today is even readable and understandable by most of our systems. What's making that worse is the number of connected devices is going to almost double in the next 3 years. So worldwide, we're going to have over 50 billion connected devices. Now, these are all creating data, location data, GPS data, behavioral information about how we're engaging with mobile devices, but it's also things like all the sensors that are being put on aircraft. When an Airbus 380 flies from point A to point B, just that one flight creates 1.3 terabytes of data on how every component of that aircraft is performing while it's in flight from point A to point B. All the social media data that's being created, user-generated data from things like TripAdvisor and Flyer Talk. But then I put weather up here because this is one that's very interesting to us. We acquired the weather company almost 2 years ago now. Because if you look at any supply chain in any industry, weather impacts it. There's always weather impacts to everything. And for us in the travel industry, think about how unexpected changes in the weather affect your customers, your processes, your operations. It's a costly proposition. So we acquired Weather Company 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, because they have 2 billion sensors placed all over the world, and they have the largest global operating Internet of Things for capturing real-time weather information from multiple points around the world. So we're starting to integrate that into a lot of these cognitive systems because it is such an important and missing element in a lot of these cognitive systems that are in a lot of these decisions that have been made over the past few years. But this is just causing this explosion of data. So here's what it looks like. This is from our research organization projecting how the volume and veracity of data is going to be changing going forward. So we're kind of in the middle of this curve, and the real growth is not going to come from the structured data that you're creating in your reservation systems and your property systems and your own transactional systems for financial information. It's in all of that data that's going to be created by these other connected devices that we call, and so it's what we call unstructured data. It's data that you're bringing in and trying to match up with your own internally created data. So it's going to get crazy real quick. For years, we've referred to this as big data, right? Big doesn't even begin to describe it because this is unstructured data, it's streaming data. More and more, it's graphical, it's video, it's photographs. Our systems today can't recognize most of that type of data. Cognitive systems can. They can recognize photographs. They can measure a customer's sentiment and project a particular color. So let's say when I log into a website, I'm going to respond better to a blue background. Annette's going to respond better to a green background. So what's going to come up for her is different than what's going to come up for me. So you can start matching user sentiment with colors and images and present dynamic pages and dynamic images relative to what that customer is going to best respond to. So based on that, that's why cognitive systems are where we're seeing whole industries be transformed. You've probably heard a lot about Watson, which is our branded cognitive solution at IBM. We started almost 4 years ago, initially with use cases in healthcare, because it was where we saw the biggest opportunity relative to the volume of information that a doctor needed to understand and consider in diagnosing a patient. And if you can cut down the diagnosis time and get to treatment faster, you can save lives. And so our first applications were in oncology. And it's because of these three things. It can consume all types of data. It understands the information. It can actually have logical reasoning to decipher through the information and decide what's important and what's not in the context of the decision that the system's being asked to consider. But it learns from that. So just a quick application of those three components. The first systems we rolled out for oncologists, we literally had the Watson healthcare system consume every medical book, every medical journal, every piece of research in the world around cancer treatment, cancer diagnosis, everything. Then, as the network of doctors begin to engage with that system, the Watson healthcare system learned from every interaction an oncologist had with each patient. So if I diagnosed something one way and then found, oh, really it should have been this, the doctor would input that information and the Watson healthcare system would learn from that. But every oncologist around the world using the system would benefit from the interaction of that one doctor with that one patient and uncovering some new finding. Well, over a 3-year period of this group of oncologists using it, and more doctor-generated information being plugged into the system with all this other medical and academic information, you had the practical and the academic stuff all coming together. It got smarter and smarter. So the other thing with cognitive systems are they learn. They learn from the interaction with humans. They learn from the decisions that are made and what's right and what's wrong. So now, 4 years later, this system now has the ability from all the information, and a lot of what it's ingested is MRIs, CAT scans, photographs of tumors and lesions on skin, things like that. In the system now, a doctor can literally take a picture of a mole or a skin lesion with a cell phone, upload it into the system, and it can respond with 90+% confidence whether that's malignant or not. based on all the other images and pictures that have been uploaded by all the doctors and oncologists around the world using it. So with cancer patients, the path to diagnosis and getting to treatment faster, huge. So there's been significant result. Now, we're in travel. We're not treating cancer patients. So you say, so how can we respond to this? So a quick example, one of our first systems in travel was with Air Canada, and it was for jet fuel, a jet fuel optimization system. So any of those in the room that work with airlines, jet fuel is at the top of your list for expenses. And if you can move the needle even less of a percentage point of improvement, you're talking about saving millions of dollars a year. So with Air Canada, we ingested into the Watson-based system we built for jet fuel optimization 3 years worth of history. City pair, weather conditions, flight pattern, every bit of information that they had saved about what that flight plan looked like and what the fuel consumption was. So going forward, the dispatcher typically would forecast what the jet fuel load needed to be, and the captain would sign off, and the captain had the final say. So we had both pilots and dispatchers in the room to help design the system and help us structure out in a cognitive system their thought process for deciding how much fuel to load on an airplane. In the end, the cognitive system that we ended up implementing is called Simon, or it was at the time. They've now changed the name to something else. But so Simon would actually forecast the jet fuel load based on inputs of weather information, the flight plan that the captain had filed, all this other information. Was there construction going on at the arrival airport or the departure airport that would cause delay times? We had real-time feeds from air traffic control as to delays on either end there. And Simon would forecast the jet fuel load. Now, the captain could overrule that, but then when the flight landed, it compared what the captain changed it to and what Simon originally forecasted, and it learned from that. And over time, the captains got comfortable with this and started trusting what Simon recommended more and more based on all the inputs. So that was one of the early systems we did a couple years ago with travel. When you think about how these cognitive systems work, I know a lot of our advertising with the little orbital graphic and the robot voice, this isn't just about robots. It's not, and that's why we've gotten away from talking about artificial intelligence. It really is about cognitive computing and using these systems for what they're good at and what we're not as good at as humans. So as humans, we've got morals. We can apply common sense. There's things that, we can emote compassion and other emotions and things like that in a decision that needs to be made about how you handle a customer issue. Cognitive systems are good at sorting through large chunks of data, locating specific knowledge, looking at long-term trends and patterns and identifying things you need to consider in your predictive models, but also natural language. They can understand natural language. So it also helps us get away from having to have very structured inputs in things like a search engine or a shopping engine on a website, things like that. Customers can come in and just speak in natural language. They can just type in free text and not have to follow your widget of destination, departure date, arrival date, number of people. We have these very structured inputs now. Cognitive systems can understand natural language. So whether it's in English or French or whatever, you can just speak to it, typing or verbally, and it understands what you're looking for. So there's definitely complements here. So it's not just about self-service robots and pushing things to self-service. It's also about finally starting to harvest all the information from what we used to refer to as big data and sorting through it and presenting to a human decision maker just the most important elements of the information they need to make the best decision possible. So I think I've kind of already referenced most of this. It's really good for starting to sort through the volumes of information we're gathering from social media data mining, sorting through things like the billions of data points we have for weather around the world that impact supply chains, but also regulatory. A lot of the industries that we work with across travel and transportation are highly regulated. And so sorting through regulatory documents and regulatory manuals and things like that to narrow down just the bits of information where a decision really needs to be made to make sure you're in regulatory compliance. So there's a lot of elements of what we deal with in travel and transportation where these cognitive systems can help us consider all the potential information out there and make the best decision possible. So, like I said, it's not just about robots. We've done some fun, interesting stuff with robots, but in some cases, it's just that one particular user interface. The exchange you're having with a robot could just as well be through a big touch panel TV in a lobby of a hotel, or when you're boarding a cruise ship. It could just as well be presented through a mobile app. So we've done some things where the robot was just a novelty to get people to engage. So this is a snapshot from the Hilton Hotel in McLean, Virginia. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, they came to us wanting to test out this idea of a lobby ambassador and to have a robot, because they thought it would be endearing to children, but also they wanted to make it something fun. And so we started with, what are a lot of the routine questions that a guest asks the front desk or the concierge or somebody else in the hotel that they could have go through a cognitive interaction with a robot. And it was fun, it was interesting. Kids tried to grab it off the counter because they thought it was a toy. So they had to strap it down with a little leash, from a cat leash, basically, because kids were yanking it off the counter. But it was a fun way to kind of start the process and to see how the guests would engage with it. It's now transitioning to something that's going to be more presented through either their mobile app or through touch panel TVs in their lobbies. So it was a way to get started and just looking at some of the obvious questions that you need to be able to answer. If you take this all the way through to what was originally presented in the roadmap, and you did want to try doing it with a robot, the robot's eyes also have facial recognition. So the initial concept was, just to get really creepy, was that the robot cognitive system would be integrated into the property management system and the loyalty system. So as soon as you authenticated yourself to that robot in the first discussion by your name, your room number, or your Hilton Honors number, if you'd already checked in that day, it then had facial recognition with you. And the next time you walked by, it addressed you by name. It knew who you were. But also, as soon as you do that, it then can connect to the Hilton Honors system and the property management system and have all your past history, all your past information from other properties, your behaviors, your special requests. So now you're talking about a robot, but any kind of user interface that now has all that information relative to you and can now understand you better and now start personalizing your experience while you're on property, whether you're asking about drinks to be delivered to your room, a restaurant to go to, what your children can do while you're at the gym, things like that. So it's about starting to gather information and integrate all this information in a way that it can be consumed through a cognitive system and really be available to start delivering a personalized service model all the way down to that direct contact with the guest. So one little plug here, we have our own internal research organization, and one of the research papers that I collaborated on this past year was just to kind of start painting this vision of where cognitive computing could go in the travel industry. So it's affectionately called Beyond Bots and Robots because it's so much more than that. And especially in travel, it is also very much about enabling our staff, the humans that have to make the best decision possible, both for us and for the guest, and about putting the best information in their hands. So I'll give you the link. This is available out on IBM.com. It's about a 15-page white paper that really speaks to all the cognitive capabilities that are out there and some of the different potential paths that we see cognitive computing going in the travel industry. But when you look at it, it kind of splits into two areas, and this is specific to travel. From the research we did and all of the travel companies that we interviewed and spoke to relative to this research, it kind of bifurcates into two areas, cognitive operations and cognitive personalization. Personalization is kind of what I was talking to relative to the proof of concept with Hilton. On the cognitive operations side, it's now about taking all this information you have about your assets and all the equipment that you may use in your business and looking at how you get the best utilization out of that equipment or other asset. So an early example in this space would be work that we did with Korean Airlines around line maintenance. So real quick, for the people that don't come from the airline industry, line maintenance is when you can do something quickly at the gate and not have to take that aircraft out of service. If a part fails on an aircraft and it's unexpected, and you now have to take that aircraft out of service, even for one day, you've now canceled at least one flight, maybe multiple flights. You've inconvenienced passengers, so it does have a customer experience impact, but that's a huge cost to have to take an aircraft out of service for even one day, haul it into a hangar to make repairs to it. So if you can detect that something's going to fail in the next X number of hours of flying time, you can do it in line maintenance as a quick change of that part or a quick repair of that part and save the effort of having to take that out of service when the unexpected repair comes up. So we did a line maintenance cognitive application for Korean Airlines. I think it's about 6 months in, so we don't really have a lot of solid data yet on what the financial results are, but just the fact that they're able to predict. Now remember, I mentioned all those tens of terabytes of data that's being captured by all of these aircraft sensors, and all the new aircraft coming out from Airbus and Boeing and Embraer, they all have these new sensors. We're collecting all types of new information, unstructured data, that's being fed into this type of application and can predict brake fails like that better than ever before to fix these things in line maintenance. So when we talk to CIOs around the world in travel, initially the way it splits is airline and rail companies are most of what makes up that 52%. So about 52% of the early applications were looking more at the operational side. About 26% were more on the personalization and customer experience side. Though, as I just mentioned, a lot of those operational systems still offer an improvement on customer experience as well. So the ones on the right tended to start with a lot of hotels, a lot of cruise lines, but you'll see here in a second, I'm going to show you kind of 3 or 4 of the applications we're working on. There's also some interesting stuff we're doing with call centers and IVRS systems and things like that fall into the category on the right. And you're going to get my slides, so don't feel the need to jot this down, but this is the link here at the bottom, just ibm.biz/beyondbots. That'll take you to a link to download a PDF of this entire study, and you can see the full findings of this and our projections for where we think cognitive is going to go in travel and transportation. I think I've spoken to most of these points, just the impact cognitive computing can have on customer experience, providing the best information to our employees as well. So think about as you're rolling out mobile apps to your employees that are on the front line and are engaging with the customer. It's overwhelming for them to stand there on a phone or a tablet and sort through a bunch of information on a smaller screen. So if cognitive systems can be used to say, okay, they know they're standing in front of Greg Land because either they've already scanned my bag tag or there's some kind of connectivity to the mobile app on my phone. They can pull up from the reservation system my itinerary. They know where I am in my trip. So they have great context just from the proximity of standing next to me, that they could immediately pull up information and narrow the field of what it is that they need to address for Greg. His bag has been lost, something's happened, his flight's been canceled. You could tee up for the agent information right there on that small mobile space to help them quickly diagnose the situation and offer some kind of remedy for my disruption in my travel. Operations, we just spoke about the example there. So there's lots of applications where it can assist with operational efficiency and optimizing your operations, where there's a lot more information now that can be taken into consideration to really optimize how your operations are running. And just overall, the analytics possibilities now with having a system that can finally digest and understand all of this type of information that we've never been able to understand before, just what it can do to supplement all of your executive reports and dashboards and analytical reports and things like that. So 3 of the areas that we've been looking at applications, inspiration and booking. Some of you heard me mention in my opening yesterday that space up the supply chain of trying to inspire travel and seize that from Google and Bing and folks like that and get them into our sites sooner. There's work being done there because the natural language search, that's like what you plug in a Google search. Well, what if you had the ability to do that on your own website and immediately pull them into a shopping path with you? That could be of benefit. And that could completely change your SEO strategy and your keyword purchase strategy with the online search engines, if you had the ability to pull somebody directly into your site with that. I'm getting the 5-minute window here, so I'm going to flip through some of these really quickly. In the time of travel or during the journey, we've got things like digital concierge, call center applications. IBM Spaces is a voice-controlled rooms application for hotels, where all the connected devices in a hotel room, that information is captured and pushed back through the mobile app to personalize the guest's experience. And then personalized pricing and offers. This is where we are starting to, somebody mentioned attribution the other day. The other side of data attributes is a lot of the new reservation systems, companies are starting to break down into smaller chunks the data attributes of what somebody is specifically shopping for. I want a car with a USB port and this and this and this, or I want a hotel room with this, this, and this. It lends us to a whole new shopping path as well, but it also changes the way you structure pricing and offers. Because if you know Greg's going to respond to a lounge pass and pricing isn't an issue for him, or you know he's going to respond more so to an upgrade and less so to something else. So we've done tests with a cognitive personalized pricing and offers system. 3 different airlines have tested it now, all with very positive results. The results are in this deck that you're going to get. But basically, it goes through, and as you push out digital campaigns, it monitors what I'm responding to, which ones I respond to, which ones I open, which ones I actually execute and convert on, and it remembers that and learns from that, and it looks at the attributes that I was focused on, and from that it knows the next offer to push to me, focus or highlight that particular attribute. Greg wants that upgrade because he's on the road every week, so that's important to him. So that's what's going to get him to convert on some promotion. And with the 3 airlines we tested this with, it actually brought their pricing up. The average price went up because people that weren't as price sensitive and converted on other things, they didn't have to offer them the financial discount because they were going to respond anyway to the upgrade or the lounge pass, and you didn't have to offer them the 10-15% discount or whatever it might be. So, seeing that I only have a couple minutes left, there's slides in here that walk through all of these use cases I just referenced. And I'm going to close with a short little video that demonstrates this last one. So the Travel Inspiration Tool is a Watson-based digital concierge tool for a mobile app that we launched this for Pebble Beach, which if you don't know is a big golf resort in Northern California. In addition to having a hotel and a resort on property, they get millions of people every year that drive through and stop there to play golf or to just have lunch or dinner. They wanted to find a way, and those were completely anonymous guests. They had no way to capture information on them. So we helped them create a mobile app that had cognitive capabilities to provide almost like a concierge application where somebody could come on property, they would get prompted to download this app, and it would give them all types of guided information. And in that, it monitored their likes and dislikes. It captured enough information to start pushing promotions to them. And it was a way to start capturing this completely anonymous guest onto their property. And it was a significant number that they were able to start engaging with. So I'm just going to run this video real quick, and we'll end it there.
Where's a good place for lunch?
Cool. We have sit-down or take-away options. Which would you like?
In the Pebble Beach app with Watson, we have a virtual concierge that allows guests to interact either through audio or through a text message-like feature. And so Watson can suggest dining, shopping, and drinking destinations.
We have a great partnership going with Pebble Beach. And Pebble Beach is an amazing golf resort in Northern California. They own 17 Mile Drive, which is a beautiful drive along the coast. Today, if you go to 17 Mile Drive, you'll get handed a paper map. We want to bring them into the modern age.
When the Pebble Beach company approached IBM, they were trying to figure out how to take digital experiences and create them in a way that was a natural extension of their already casually elegant guest services program. Part of what IBM is bringing to the table is cognitive tools like Watson, but also just a understanding of users and how guests behave, and making technologies that make a natural fit for a resort environment.
We have about 1.5 million visitors come into the forest every year. Those are not just our hotel and golf guests, but these are people who are making a trip to California. They tend to drive up and down the coast, and they make a stop at Pebble Beach. We really don't know very much about those guests at all. So our ability to capture some more information about them can be very helpful to us to try to understand what they're really looking for. So the ability to push a marketing offer to those 1.5 million visitors that are coming in every year, we think that's going to drive more business for us.
The Pebble Beach app with Watson has audio tours. If you drive along 17 Mile Drive, there's points of interest signs that will tell you about each place that you're passing. Another feature we're really excited about in the app is the Explore the Resort feature.
It's really going to drive customers to where the hotspots are, where the trends are, what's happening right now as far as menus, what's fresh on the menus, and of course, the insider tips.
I've really enjoyed working with Watson, training Watson. It's been really cool to see him get smarter.
We want to partner with a company that's best in class. And the opportunity to partner with IBM and to create an app and look for other types of technology solutions to help us improve that customer service, that's what really makes the partnership.
So I know that was kind of cognitive by fire hose in 30 minutes flat, but download the research paper that I posted the link for. We also have another research paper that I co-authored that's being published on the same site next week, called the Digital Reinvention of Travel, that speaks to not only cognitive, but a lot of what we've been talking about the last couple of days. Just all the things you have to consider in the digital transformation for digital customer experience. So it speaks to a lot of the stuff Rufino talked about this morning, but it talks heavily about data organization and data consolidation and why that's so important, not only in digital transformation, but preparing for cognitive systems that should be in your roadmap if they're not, for somewhere down the road. It may be 2 years, it may be 5 years, it may be 10 years, but it's something you've got to consider now in how you're organizing and structuring your data, because partners you work with are going to have it. You're going to have to engage with other cognitive systems. It's just the direction all computing is going for the reasons that I stated relative to finally having systems that can digest and utilize all of this big data that we've been preaching about for 10 years. So I will leave it at that. You'll get the rest of these slides that go into some detail on some of the applications we're working on specifically for travel and transportation, with just some questions to pose to your own management team as you think about where cognitive fits into your overall roadmap. So I'll leave it at that and move on to the next person. So